I have the man of the hour on the line with me today, or I should say the man of the time. Nyiam is one of our remote viewers with the Future Forecasting Group, for those of you who aren't familiar with his work. He foresaw I'll say the shot heard around the world, the shot missed around the world, save for a piece of the ear here. Nyiam predicted through his remote viewing sessions back in April the shooting at President Donald Trump. I'm going to talk to him about that tonight and so many other things involving remote viewing and peering into the future. Nyiam, how are you, sir? So good to see you.
I'm doing very well. It's good to see you too. It's been a while.
It has been. What's new with you? I understand you've been, before we get into all the heavy stuff with your predictions and future times and timelines, let's scale it back a minute and talk about what else is going on in your world. I know it's been intense right now with everything else.
Yeah, we've been keeping the whole production schedule going with FFG. We've been working a bunch of different things. We just did Pfizer. We did a target on Pfizer the
I
other
didn't
day.
see that one yet. Did you?
We did we did a target on Mars. There was
Yeah,
some kind of rock formation that people thought maybe looked like bones or something, and
right.
we worked that target. Yeah, we've been doing some interesting things. Also, I did my first round of students teaching remote viewing HRVG protocol to my first batch of students, and I mean, I was really impressed.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very honest. It wasn't easy for me when I was learning. It wasn't easy.
Right.
There was a lot of periods of time where it was just like, is this working or not? Type moments. But
right.
dealing with the students, it's like, I mean, they were turning out some great data. Really,
how long was your course
really
with them?
It was for 10 weeks.
10 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe they worked, I don't know, let's see, like every week, between every class, they maybe worked like 4 or 5 targets.
Okay.
So maybe it was like 20 targets in total, maybe something around that. And it's like, yeah, when I was learning, it was like, I maybe did like 50 targets just on the first part, you know what I mean? Whereas here they're doing, 20 targets throughout the whole, the whole protocol, learning the whole protocol, but they still turned out some really impressive results. I wasn't expecting it to be like that. You know what I mean? I was thinking back onto when I was doing it and thinking like,
Right.
this is going to be a struggle, or this is going to be hard. I'm hoping that they have a moment, have some good moments within the course time so that they can see
Right.
it manifest and I can give them advice and stuff like that. And yeah, a lot of them had great moments where it was pretty undeniable that, I just remote viewed. It may not have been knock it out of the park, but it's like, okay,
Right.
something happened.
Can't deny they have elements of it.
Yeah,
Right?
they can't deny the fact that something was really coming through there. So
and as an introductory course, I think that's awesome to get. I mean, that's what you should get. Anything else is always, you always hear about those students who hit those home runs because it's fascinating, but that's not the norm for everybody. Everybody's usually just having that piece of target contact.
Yeah. So I tried to expose them to the main meat and bones of the protocol as much as possible so that when the course is over, they can run with it on their own. You know what I mean? Keep practicing and keep it going. So yeah, really some really impressive work.
So you teach them the full, like every stage in the very beginning, and then they're just working a full session with these targets?
No, in the first, the first lesson is just like S1, like just the visual ideograms in the first lesson. And then I give them, I think there's 2 or 3 weeks, a break there where there's just a bunch of targets for them to work. And then we add on the ideograms and the Playfair, the low level data in the next week. Mm-hmm. And then there's a practice period, a application period. So it's like learn something, have a chance applying it, then move to the next stage. So it builds up on top of each other.
Right.
Because, it's a lot. It turns out being a lot at the end of the day. All the protocols stacked up,
Yeah, and each stage in and of itself, I mean, that's how I learned. Daz taught me, one stage at a time, and I'd work however many targets per stage until he felt I was ready to move on to the next one. I still go back to stage 1 and try to refine that because that's such a crucial stage. I think it sets you up. Some people I think kind of bypass stage 1 that I've spoken to, but I find a lot of value in it. But it's also an area that I sometimes struggle with in terms of my ideogram and interpreting it. And I find that kind of sets me up. Have you had that experience? I'm not sure if you have that now, but
Oh yeah, when I I kind of self-taught myself initially,
Right.
CRV style protocols, and it's like, yeah, I would read the manual and try different things, and after a while, it was like, no, you're kind of rushing too far into this. Bring it back to the
Yeah.
basics. Get each stage to the point where it's like you have more confidence.
Hmm.
It's remote viewing is such a non-logical process. Your logical analytical self doesn't know what the target is, so
Right.
you have to kind of build the trust with your intuition over the time,
Yeah.
as you learn it. So going back to the basics, taking each stage at a time and building your trust and your confidence in it will help you, as you move forward, because then you're not going to be doubting yourself as you move through the session, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you learn to differentiate between that imaginary piece and what's, that signal line data coming in that's of value. I've found that I'm starting to feel a difference. You do those ideograms and it's like, all right, I'm going to force it and try to get some. And then sometimes you get that one ideogram and boom, it just hits, right? And everything just starts flowing. Those are the ones that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, so that's great that your first class was a success. Any plans for future cohorts coming up online or?
Yeah, we're taking students now for, yeah, it's gonna be this weekend. July 21st is starting
Wow.
the next set of students.
What's been, I guess, the greatest value for you as a teacher, your biggest takeaway with this first cohort?
Really, it's seeing, it's one thing to do remote viewing
Hmm.
and see the results, but showing someone the steps and then seeing them do it and being on the side of the tasker, I'm here
Yeah.
picking these targets, giving it to a student who some of them don't really have that much experience in remote viewing before, and
Hmm.
to see them, draw the visual ideogram that matches the target, or get those lines of data, you really see it kind of comes full circle. It's like, okay, now I'm on the outside looking in and seeing how it manifests in people's data, and you kind of start to see the different ways that people, like, are attracted to different kinds of data,
Yeah.
um, and just the learning process in general. Going from asking questions like, oh, I feel like a lot of the students would be telling me, I feel like I'm just guessing, I don't feel like I'm, making any contact with it. But then they get the feedback and it's like, well, look,
Yeah.
look what you wrote there. That's
Yeah.
exactly what was there. It's like, you
Yeah.
may feel like you're just guessing. You may feel like you're not getting contact, but go with it. You know what I mean? You just got to move through these steps. They're like, it's kind of like the training wheels that,
Hmm.
guide your awareness through this process. And if you follow it, I mean, your chances of getting legit data is a lot higher if you just follow those steps.
I found that teaching anything, I've never taught remote viewing, but just as a teacher in general, the more you teach something, the better you learn it, the better you understand it, because first you start to see how other people approach it. Then you see how they learn it, and then you start to see commonalities and patterns. So this student reminds me of this type of learner, and you know how to approach that student. Everybody learns a little bit differently. And I think it makes you a better practitioner all around as you're going through teaching. So that's awesome. I'm glad you have another cohort coming on too. So I have to ask, shifting gears for a minute, and I don't want to get into it. I don't even think this one's been released yet. But your Pfizer session, is that are people gonna get in trouble for that one? You guys have that kind of
um,
data.
I get the focus on that one was the financial part of it. Like, I guess they wanted us
Okay.
to see the stock, what's going to happen with the stock or whatnot. But
Right.
there was some data and Sean had some data where he was drawing the biology and drawing cells and things entering the cell. So
Yeah. Oh
Daz had
boy.
some governmental CIA drug type data in there. So
Wow.
it touched on some areas that some people may find really interesting aside from just the financial part of it.
During COVID, I won't even mention their name on the platform because of all the heat that was coming on people who were, remember when people were criticizing the vax and everything, and
Yeah.
it was a big sin online to say that stuff. So that's cool. I'll look for that. I'll look for that session. Looking forward to it. Well, listen, I want to talk about this data point, these several data points that you and the team had, and I know it's been buzzing online, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I looked at your sketches, looked at your data. I mean, you clearly had data on this assassination attempt on Trump, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. I guess there's a kind of recognition that happens like whenever you produce certain data and then an event plays out, kind of like just that gut reaction when it happens. It's like immediately triggers you to, it's like, oh, that's what that's what I drew. That's what I drew
Yeah.
that. And it's one thing for me to have that reaction, but I had multiple people message me and say,
Yeah.
look, this is the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this happen. Your session was the first thing that came to mind. So
Yeah.
that's kind
That's
of,
huge. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's has a lot to do with just, imagery and the way the imagery penetrates people's
Hmm.
consciousness, similar to how,
Yeah.
people will be like, oh, The Simpsons
Hmm.
had this in their thing, or a movie has this. It's like the first thing that comes to their mind is where they've
Yeah.
seen it before, right?
Yeah.
So, um, similarly, the remote viewing is getting to that level where it's the imagery and the data is good enough to trigger that reaction in somebody, and I think that shows the effectiveness of it or the usefulness of it. For it to trigger somebody into that recognition when they see it
Yeah.
happen, or when leading up to it happening, or whatever it may be. That's that same mechanism that happens when you have deja vu, or where you have like a
Yeah.
precognitive dream. It's that same
Yeah.
reaction that happens there. So, it's it's fascinating. Every time it happens, it blows my mind.
Do you think that now that recognition happens and it's creating a stronger feedback loop for you, right? So do you think that's in some way making you an even stronger viewer that's amplifying these signals of these things that you're hitting on?
That may be the case. There's a author, Eric Wargo. He has a book called Time Loops, and
Hmm.
he talks about his idea or his model of how he thinks precognition works is like your future self is influencing you in the present.
Hmm.
Like the thing that you see in the future is kind of like boosting the signal back to you in the present
Yeah.
moment. So the fact that a lot of people are seeing this, or the fact that it's a big news event that causes a ripple in consciousness, may contribute to it being a strong impression or a strong signal when we perceive it. And that's, I think that's really important in terms of what we're doing at FFG. This is like, it's experimental in terms of like, I don't know many other remote viewing studies or anything that really focused on just looking at future events very, repeatedly.
Right.
There's, I know there's applied precognition, the APP group, but they do like
Right.
ARV on future events. They don't actually try and perceive the event
Right.
itself. Or I know Dale
Yeah, you guys are
Graff.
describing the story itself, names
Yeah,
and
yeah. Dale
locations and
Graff. I know
approximate
Dale
dates.
Graff had that experiment where he looked at the cartoons in the newspaper.
Hmm.
What's going to be the doodle in the newspaper the next day. Those are kind of like known events. That's like, okay,
Right.
we know there's gonna be a doodle in the newspaper tomorrow.
Right.
What's gonna be in
Right.
it? This is more like trying to perceive what events are gonna occur in the future.
Yeah.
The variability of what's gonna happen is it's a much wider range and more unknown. There's more unknowns to it. So
Yeah,
I
it's
think
it's virtually a blind target. I mean, there's obviously a lot of area for contamination, especially what's trending in the news, right? But when
yes,
you get
yes,
your random alligator or big fish stories at the which are my favorite ones, um, that you just can't. I mean, that's not chance. And you've done it enough publicly on the record, out there online, time stamped a month before it comes out. Sometimes it's a couple of days before it comes out,
yeah.
but all of you have done it consistently enough. Like, it's 100% undeniable. Like, people can predict the future with accuracy.
Yeah, yeah, and we've been doing it so long, we know it. We know that. Like, we can say with
Right.
with confidence that yes, this is a real
Right.
phenomenon. Whereas there's still people who either don't think it's real at all, and then there's people who are in between where they think remote viewing's real, but they have never explored this part of remote viewing. It's always just
Yeah.
been verifiable things or things in the past or
Right.
practice targets. I think we're treading new water, with what we do
Yeah.
here, consistently, what has it been like four plus years now?
Yeah, at least. Right.
Yeah, like 4 years going on every month doing this over and
Yeah.
over. Yeah, there's going to be some mistakes. There's going to be but overall, you're going to observe the overall phenomenon of what's happening
Hmm.
here. And over that time, it's like, yeah, we've seen, yes, the data of these events comes through. Sometimes they're super unambiguous and undeniable. Sometimes it's like, okay, there's some noise mixed in there. Sometimes they fall ahead of where we would like them to be. Sometimes they happen before we can even get our debrief
get it out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's times we would log on and Dick would say, "Look, this just happened," as we're getting ready to present,
yeah,
and it had already just happened for him.
yeah.
It's still a wild thing. I still remember when I first started watching Dick and Daz do it on Farsight, and it was, it's mind blowing, and I think that's why there's so much chatter online about it, and people want to immediately shut it down because it's paradigm shifting. It's like, wait a minute, you're actually able to record aspects of the future. How is that possible? What does that tell us about our current reality, our timeline, or is everything pre-written? I mean, what I've asked other viewers is, what are your thoughts on that? Is the future pre-written if you're able to see it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I don't think it's pre-written. Maybe some aspects, maybe some events aren't maybe not pre-written, but they've built up a kind of momentum where they have to happen. You know what I mean? Certain things have occurred and there's no getting out of it. It's going to happen at some point. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so controversial. It's because the future is such an unknown that our logical minds, it's hard for us to explain or make sense out of it. So our kind of initial reaction is to kind of push it away and say, okay, it's not happening. Remote viewing the past is more easier to digest. It's like, okay, somehow the remote viewer is projecting themselves to the target, or whatever ways people like to explain it. It's like, it's easier to try to explain what's happening. But when it comes to the future event, it's like, okay, it didn't even happen yet. So how is this happening? And
do you think, is that indicative that maybe it did happen?
On some level, either, I guess there's a bunch of different ways you could look at it. I try not to bog myself down too much with how it's happening, but it's, I would say after doing this for so long, I would say it seems like information about events is available before they happen. Are they going to happen? When they're going to happen? That might be a different story. Like you have a CD or a DVD and you're going to, the information's on the CD. When are you going to pop it in? When are you going to get to that point in the timeline in the movie? That's a different story. Maybe it's a similar kind of thing happening in reality where certain events are kind of in the blueprint stage where they're formulating, but they haven't crystallized yet. And maybe that crystallization process is not set in stone. Maybe it happens due to a bunch of different factors have to come into play before an event actually like manifests or happens. Because that would
think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that would kind of explain why we seem to be able to perceive events, but some of them might happen later on. Like it's like, okay, I want to see what's going to happen in July, and it's like you see this event and then it doesn't happen in July. It happens in August. It's like, well, why did that happen? The logical mind wants to say, okay, remote viewing the future doesn't work. It might look at it that way. But what if the nature of time and reality is different than what we expect? What if the way events manifest is outside of the range of what our intention is? We might want it to work a certain way, but what if it doesn't operate that way? Maybe it's not as simple as just saying, what happened? What's the big event next month? What if there is no big event next month?
We've seen that, right? If that's our focus, looking for the big event and it doesn't exist, then your mind's going to wander to either the next big event or the next interesting thing, right? Or just bring back noise or nothing. So it's you're right. I mean, I've heard this from other viewers. It's hard to, Dick says it too. It's hard to target specifically 30 days out and stay within that 30 days. And like you said, if it doesn't happen within that 30 days, it happens 45 days, 60 or 90 days out. Does that count as a miss? Does that count as nope, you didn't have it because it was too soon? I mean, bringing it back to your data, I mean, it was pretty, the whole team's data was pretty specific. You had the scope with the sites. You knew it was a political event. You had the word assassination in there. Dick had the bloody face and everything drawn. I don't know if you had blood on the face too or not, but there was some very distinct imagery that the team brought back. Does it matter if it was 3 months before it happened or 2 months before it happened instead of 30 days?
Yeah, I think that comes down to the different perspectives of remote viewing. There's a certain part of us that wants to stay within certain, realms of academia or scientific interpretation, and we
Right.
don't want to receive certain types of criticism, you know, on the work we do. Whereas there's a part that's okay. Let's see what happens. Let's actually
Yeah.
observe what happens over time. And I think
Right.
that's the benefit of what we've been doing here. It's like we can't just make assumptions in new areas. Remote viewing the future isn't something that many people are doing. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
not really the main focus of a lot of remote viewing work. So if over 4 years, you start to observe, okay, these events don't always fall within the time scale that we want it to fall into.
Hmm.
Why is that? We got to start asking that question. Or maybe we need to be more loose with our intention. Maybe that part of us that brings us a precognitive dream or gives us a hunch about something in the future, maybe for whatever reasons, it's attracted to certain kinds of information. Maybe, certain types of events are more attractive, just like how a viewer might be attracted to certain things at a target and miss the main aspect of a target. They might be attracted to something else. Maybe there's a similar kind of thing happening in time in the future. Certain events may have a bigger pull or entropy or however, people like to explain that. I think we're seeing that play out in our data. So, I'm not as worried about, um, oh, is it a hit or is it a miss, or you can't count this or you can't count that. I'm more about, okay, let's put it on the record and see what happens, right? Okay,
Hmm.
maybe it did happen after, the month after. Um, does it match with the data? Is it unambiguously, like, you look at that and you go, okay, this is, we got to be honest with ourselves. Is this, does this match? Is this a good fit for this? And then we can adjust how we handle data in the future. I like to think of it like, with ARV, we want ARV to work a certain way. We want target A to be perceived when the outcome is going to be, the win. If this team wins, we want it to be target A. But we find that, okay, sometimes people see target B. Why does that happen? Um, so we try and rearrange the way things happen to try and get a cleaner result. Well, it might be a similar thing with looking at the future. Maybe it's not just let's see what happens in this certain time frame. Maybe there's a different way we have to go about tasking or trying to open ourselves up to those kinds of impressions. Um, that's kind of
It's adjusting our own expectations, I guess, then, right? Because with remote viewing, I mean, a lot of it's structured, and I think we want to stick to the structure, but we don't want to be as rigid in our thinking about it, I think is what you're saying, right? You want to have
yeah,
that
yeah,
open mind because it is an experiment. We are learning with every session is an opportunity to learn not just about your target, but about how your own mind works, how it interacts with this matrix, how remote viewing itself works and the mechanism behind it. So if you're saying it's got to be 30 days and it's not, well, you can either choose to say, well, it's a miss and scrap it, or let's explore this, let's understand this, and let's
yeah.
see
Or
really
okay,
what's
maybe
going
you
on.
count it as a miss, but that doesn't mean you can't acknowledge that. Okay, it actually this data manifested in the following month. That doesn't mean you
Right,
still can't acknowledge it and point it out. I mean,
right.
it was still done in advance, right? So
You still saw the future at the end of the day, like you saw the future.
yeah, it would count. It would still be a form of precognition, right?
Right,
If it's for me, if it's an unambiguous type of hit, you know what I mean? Obviously,
right.
there's different degrees of trying to analyze data and trying to make it fit to a certain scenario if
Hmm.
it looks like it matches. But I'm saying if
Right.
we're honest with ourselves and we
Yeah.
look at the imagery and we look at the descriptions, if we notice that pattern, if we notice that this thing is happening over and over again, then I think it's more about us adjusting to align with that instead of trying to force our will on it, that it has to happen this way. It has to happen this way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. What's what's been the biggest challenge since this information came out, if any, for you? Has anything you found anything to be a little bit challenging with this information?
Um, Challenging, not so much. Maybe just, it's just got me thinking of kind of the things we're talking about. Why does it come up early? Why would it come out in April if the event happens in July? Or
Yeah.
there was also some other videos circulating. There was one with the pastor who was giving a vision that he had of the future about Donald Trump, and I'm not sure if it was I'm not sure if the date on the video was when he actually made that prediction, but it was around the same time. It was around March
Hmm.
when I did my session. So it just has me thinking, like, is there like kind of like a signal that goes out at a certain time, like a wave front
Yeah.
that people can pick up on? Um, yeah,
I
it's
think
got me
that's
thinking.
important.
Yeah,
I think that's important. And I'm thinking back to Edward's ominous feeling back in November of 2017. And that's how he described it. He just like it came at him, right? And because you know how sensitive Edward is, he picked up on it. He did this session and ended up being everything that was COVID. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, this got a ton of emotional reaction from the entire world
yeah,
looking at this. And you are highly attuned to world events, near future events, because you've been doing this for so long. I mean, beyond future forecasting group, you've been doing this for a long time.
yeah,
And like you said, there's certain things we're interested in. I think that you become, it's a muscle. You're tuning yourself into certain frequencies and things, and that came through for you. And that's interesting. Maybe a wave does come back, shoots back through time.
yeah. I think we got to stay open to those kinds of possibilities. And also with us, when I do this, it's like setting your intention to perceive those big events. You know what I mean? What's going to be that thing and coming up in the future that people are going to react to, that people are going to all see, and
Right.
then kind of make him. It's going to be a buzz. Um, it's just really interesting. It's like this. When's the last time a major president was an attempt was made on their life, like on national TV or something? That was probably like Reagan
It
or
was
something like
Reagan,
that.
right? Back
But
in the
yeah, there's been
80s.
other assassinations, and other leaders around the world
Right.
since
Other
then. But
countries.
like one that's like, whoa, worldwide
Yeah.
news, and everyone's reacting to it in this way. It's like the ex-president of the United States.
Yeah.
I had that one data point in my session that was like history repeats itself,
Yeah.
and that was kind of like the data point that made me go, okay, I need to, I wrote my name and dated it at the bottom. I was like, this, I never got that. I never got that before. I never got that
Hmm.
impression. Like this felt like, okay, I'm seeing someone looking down a rifle. It feels like an assassination event. And I get the point, history repeats itself. I was like, okay,
Hmm.
this is going to be a big event. And I think the following month or shortly after that, there was some kind of assassination attempt on another leader in, I forget the country, Slovenia or something like that.
Hmm.
But it wasn't a match. I mean, you could
Yeah.
reduce my data and say, okay, assassination, and it's a match, but
Right.
it wasn't a match. The imagery didn't
Yeah.
match, the data points didn't match that way. So
Right.
I'm not in any kind of rush to make my data fit something. You know what I mean? I'm trying to actually look at the imagery and look at the descriptions and honestly determine, okay, does this align with this event or not? You know what I mean? Because that's over the years, that's the type of remote viewing that I see myself doing. I see
Hmm.
myself drawing people and drawing the actual location and things like that. So when it comes to future events, that's what I'm judging the feedback on. That's how I'm judging it. It's like just saying assassination is not good enough for me. It has to match. The imagery has to match as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me, that's how I judge it. So
Well, I think, meaning you as an advanced viewer, I think that's huge. That's significant because we can do those, and I've done several of them, the remote viewing sessions where you're speaking in very general terms, right? And it's hard to get specific without trying to name a target as you're learning to remote view. And you want to have that. And like that was a challenge for me is working with all of you guys, especially at world events. You're naming names and locations, you're writing the news story, it sounds like when I read your world events. So I would sit down and try to do world events. And once I do that, now I'm going into imagination worlds. And I try to break it down and reduce it. And it's just so broad and general. And the more I practice, the more I look at a target over time, I'm able to, by describing the basic gestalts of it, get a little bit more specific with things. But it takes a while to get to that point. And I think it speaks to your discipline, caring about it at that level. You want to get those specific details. That's not an easy thing to do.
yeah, I think I've talked about this before. I actually just did a talk on IRVA. I did a talk for IRVA the other day talking about this similar concept, which is imagery and remote viewing speaks to a different part of us. It speaks to that nonverbal pattern recognition part of us. So I'm sure a lot of people saw the image that I did for this assassination event. Even if you took all the words away from my session and just showed them the imagery, they would probably make that connection and say, "Oh, that looks just like the what was just on the news the other day, just based on the imagery." So that's kind of the importance of how imagery works in consciousness and like, through dreams, right? Our dreams aren't full of words. They're full of experience and images. And those images are what we end up recognizing later on. Something happens and we go, oh, I saw this. This is what I saw in my dream. This is what happened to me in my dream. So I think that same mechanism of our subconscious is just being harnessed through remote viewing. In the terms, and when we're trying to do precognitive, looking into the future. And I guess the bit of the advantage is I'm in a conscious state, so I'm able to kind of I'm able to probe into it a little more and get some more details out of it instead of kind of forgetting it or not, it being hazy in a dream state. So imagery is, an image is worth 1,000 words, right? That's what they say. And it's like, that's what speaks to consciousness. Images is what really speaks to consciousness. Every news story has a big image there plastered on the front, right? So
yeah, we're very visual creatures, and even in presentations, I'm not a very visual guy. I can't draw to save my life. I write and describe a lot more. But when you look at a presentation, everybody wants to see the imagery. If you're scrolling through, a YouTube video, people are stopping for the imagery because that's such a powerful thing as opposed to like reading somebody's words on a screen. There's real power in capturing that snapshot there.
Yeah, the stat is 80 to 90% of what we perceive at any moment is visual, and the visual information is the most easily processed information that we get. So we're the best at assimilating visual information. So, people might say, okay, I'm not a visual learner, but really, yes, everyone is a visual learner. You operate every day using your vision. You know what I mean? That's how you orient yourself and operate in the world. Right. So, in my opinion, especially when it comes to remote viewing the future, the imagery becomes even more important because you're going to have to be able to recognize the event when it happens, right? Yeah. And using words alone, that can be difficult because you can apply the words alone to so many different events. Like you were saying, it could seem so general with just the word description. But if you have an image and that image appears later in the news, that's just undeniable. There's nothing you can, there's no words that need to say anything about it. It's just like that imagery, there it is. It's repeated again. And that part of us recognizes it immediately.
I feel that the words, more work isn't the word I'm looking for, but it's more detail needed in your words. If you're more of a person who's going to write like I do, I like getting into automatic writing in my remote viewing sessions is what I've been exploring right now. But it requires another level of detail, which is it's a fine line that you're walking, right? Once you start going down that road. But that image, it just pops. And like you said, it's worth 1,000 words. I remember saying, like, with one of my book covers, I had a friend design it for me. And I said, you captured what took me 52,000 words to explain. You captured it in one image on the cover of my book. There's something powerful about a graphic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a part of our nonverbal awareness that, it could even be what we call the subconscious. You know what I mean? Our nonverbal awareness could be the subconscious, what we call the subconscious, and it doesn't need words. It has a non-verbal recognition. So if you look at an image of something, there's a part of you that recognizes it without you naming it. You don't need to look at the image. You could look at an image and say, "Oh, that's a person at a podium," but before you even said that, there was a part of you that non-verbally understood what it was. The image.
Right. You knew what it was.
Yeah.
Let me shift slightly here, moving from imagery and just talking about, the ethics and responsibility of data like this, right? I mean, I saw somebody, there was so much, not so much, but you have people who want to cast that negative shadow on events like this, on predictions like this. And one of the ones that stood out was, oh, well, if you saw it so long ago, why didn't you warn anybody? Why didn't you say anything? What are your thoughts on that, or your response to something like that, in terms of, like, again, the ethics and the responsibility of having that ability to see into the future?
Yeah, my response would be the point of the remote viewing, you know, is not to cause alarm, right? I don't want
Mhm.
to, that's not the point that I do this. It's not to cause an alarm. It's kind of just a byproduct of what we're trying to do. In order to try and perceive something in the future, the one of the easier ways to try and do that, especially in a group setting and in a way that everyone can see it and everyone can recognize it, is to look at a major event that
Right.
everyone's gonna see in the future. So by targeting these major events, which is out of my control what exactly is going to happen in the future, but more times than not, it's a negative event, right? There's something bad
Yeah.
happens, and that's what
Right.
we human human awareness is tuned to bad things because we
That's what the
want to
news likes to
avoid.
cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we want to avoid the bad things, right? So
Hmm.
when your day is going good, you just have a good day and you don't say anything.
Hmm.
When something bad happens, you notice it and you go, why did this happen? It's a
Yeah.
similar thing looking into the future. It's like you're going to pick up on these negative events that are going to affect the world. And, you know, I can't sit there and pretend like I know everything. I don't
Hmm.
know everything about what's going to happen. I have these moments in my remote viewing where it's like, okay, I see something for a moment. I get
Right.
some more, I probe some information into it. We only spend maybe a week working on the future events, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to touch on as many possible events as possible. I'm trying to
Right.
touch on as many events as possible because it's not perfect, right? I'm not
Yeah.
gonna some events might be a miss, some I might butcher and get wrong. So it's like I'm trying to do enough of them so that it's like, okay, hopefully a couple of these are accurate, accurate enough. So
And that,
it's not to cause an alarm for people, and I don't want to, and ultimately me or you or Daz or Dick or whoever it is that perceives an event, we don't have that kind of influence or power to really do
right.
anything. What am I going to do? Call Donald Trump on his cell phone? Or we're
Right.
publishing the data. We're doing our part. We're publishing it to
Right.
our subscribers. It gets out into the world by world.